Hello, and welcome to our third and final book club installment of the summer. We're honored to spend time with you today. Please do note we are recording the speaker portion of this event for use on our YouTube channel, but the question and answer session will not be recorded. A little bit about AKA. AKA is a grassroots organization founded over 30 years ago to promote education, connection, and support across the adoption constellation. At AKA, we welcome all members of the adoption constellation, including adopted people, birth and first parents, adoptive parents, extended family members, and professionals. We also welcome our adjacent communities of donor-conceived persons and DNA discoveries. These parties are often separated, but we at AKA believe that great benefit comes from learning and sharing together. Just a word about membership. Again, we are a nonprofit powered by volunteers, so we rely primarily on membership dues for the operation of our organization. If you're not currently a member, please consider joining. Just a little note of self-care. Today's featured book includes sensitive subject matter, and today's discussion, therefore, might be triggering. We do want to remind you all to take good care of yourselves. If you do need help, the National Hotline for Mental Health Crises and Suicide Prevention is 1-800-950-6264. Or you can always call and text the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988. And now a word on housekeeping. To minimize distraction, please mute yourself during the meeting. If you do have a question, just raise your hand or type in the chat. If opinions are expressed during the meeting today that make you uncomfortable, please, we ask you to listen, reflect, and respond respectfully. We strive to provide a space where all of our members feel safe to share individual experiences, support, and gain knowledge from each other. Okay, it is that time. Laura L. Engel, our author. Just a little bit about Laura. When Laura Engel retired from a 35-year corporate career in 2016, her only plans were to catch up on hobbies and travel with her husband. Then, just months later, a miracle. The son she'd been forced to surrender when she was a teenager found her through DNA. Their reunion was thrilling, and Laura began journaling about the secret she'd been told to take to the grave. She wrote of a society that sent unwed mothers away, coerced to force them to sign away their flesh and blood, and shamed them into silence, telling them, "You'll forget this ever happened." But Laura had never forgotten and was no longer willing to stay silent. That journal blossomed into a memoir, aptly titled, "You'll Forget This Ever Happened: Secrets, Shame, and Adoption in the 1960s. Excerpts from Laura's memoir have been performed on stage at 2 San Diego memoir showcases and selected for 5 Shaking the Tree anthologies. Her book is an Amazon Top 100 seller, and she's won both the National Indie Excellence and International Book Awards. Laura's written 2 monologues performed for the Journal of Expressive Writing, and her essays have been published in Writer's Digest, Severance, Big Easy Magazine, and Adoption and Beyond, among others. She's been interviewed on numerous podcasts regarding the heartbreak of closed adoption and writing to heal. Laura's memoir honors and gives voice to her 17-year-old self, her firstborn son, and the millions of mothers and babies separated during the United States baby scoop era. So please welcome Laura L. Engel.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And it's an honor being here today. I just wanted to, first of all, thank you. And it's been really nice getting to know about your organization. And I've known Hannah for a while and watched her and listened to her. And and thought, wow, she's doing so much, as you all are, for this community that we're all part of. When I first wrote my book, I had no idea, number one, that I was going to write a book. And I should have said when I first began writing my book. I had been journaling because I always journaled my whole life, but my son had found me, and it was a miracle in my life. I tell everyone, and this is the truth, it was something that I knew it would be great if it ever happened. I had no idea how magical it would be. It was truly magical for me to have my son in my life again, this baby who I had been forced to give up. And after 50 years, I thought it's probably never going to happen. And if it does happen, is he going to hate me? Because I had so much hate and grief for myself. And I felt like everyone looked down upon me, because that's how we were treated in those days as young women. When you became pregnant, you had pretty much committed a crime. And especially if the boyfriend or boy who was the father had nothing to do with you, then you really, really were looked down upon, because you had nowhere to turn. When I was writing my book, when it became a book, I realized I was putting it out there. I was putting a story out there that I thought was my story. But the more I researched while I was writing, the more I realized this is not just my story. This is all the women who went through this, the millions of women who went through this, and the millions of children who were severed from their mothers because, in society's opinion, it was the right thing to do. And the more I researched it, the more I realized not only is this my story, it's their story, and by God, I'm going to tell it. I went from being totally secretive to wanting to tell the world. This is what was happening back then. And it all began when I was talking to my son after our first reunion. He actually found me through Ancestry DNA. And after he found me, we started communicating immediately. And then he flew out 4 days later from Louisiana to California to see me. And it was there was so much love, and DNA was just shouting loud and clear. I have 3 other sons that I raised, and this son seemed to be even more like me than the ones I had raised, which we all found very funny. We were just like, this is crazy, but it was true. He had a daughter who was like, she looks so much like me. She's like my clone. And the beauty and miracle of all this was I never would have known him. I never would have known these children except for DNA. And I was so, so thankful and grateful. So as I was writing it, I would send manuscripts I'm part of the manuscript to him, and he would look it over and read it, and he loved it. And all of a sudden I realized I needed to do this. I needed to go forward. And I never dreamed when I did how it would open doors in my life to meet other adoptees, to meet other birth mothers, birth fathers. And that has been the miracle of writing this whole story, is that it has led to so many really good things, like meeting people like you, people who have been through all the different trauma that I went through as a birth mother and that my son went through as an adoptee, and opening up a world that I really didn't even know existed out there. What I wanted to do is tell you a little bit about the unwed mother's home. When I was at the unwed mother's home, which was very common back then, so my story is so much like everyone else's, but we're all a little different. And when I was there, we had to work. The girls had to work, and I worked in the nursery. And while I was working in the nursery, I became friends with a nurse there who was in charge. And she was just this lovely, lovely Black lady. And I was a little girl, a teenager from the South, 17-year-old, who had never even known any Black people except, from a distance. This was another thing that happened during this time. I learned so much about life that I'd never known in my closed little world that I had lived in and been raised in. And she took a liking to me. And of course, I loved her because she was non-judgmental. She was so good to the girls who worked for her. And she never made you feel like less, which was not true of the rest of the staff. So what I did is I got to be friends with her. And after I had my son, my parents came and got me 2 days after I had him. I only got to hold him twice. And both times were hurried. I had been pretty drugged for the delivery and I was having a lot of health issues. So they kept me from him. When I got home, I went through a depression that I think I was almost insane. I wanted my son so badly and I wanted to go back there. I wanted to talk about it. Nobody would talk about it. Nobody would say, how do you feel? Or are you getting through this okay? There was no counseling in 1967, at least in my town or through my family. There was no, help. There was no therapy. There was no groups. There was nothing. So I was alone, a kid alone. So what happened was I talked my brother into driving me. He was a year younger than me. He had his driver's license in a car. I had talked him into driving me back to New Orleans where the unwed mother's home was. And he did. He drove me back there. And it was the last time I saw my son for 50 years. And I'm so grateful for that one moment because not only did I get to see him and hold him, but, I'm going to read this and then I'll tell you the rest of the story. This is a part of chapter 34 in my book. And I just wanted to give you a little background of what I'm doing. My brother's driving me over to New Orleans. I won't read all the build up to that, but I'm just going to read from the time we get there. Okay. The reason we were on this trip to New Orleans never entered our conversation. When I pleaded with him that I desperately needed a ride, I had not said why, and he never asked. Once there, I directed Billy to park on the side street. A stew of emotions flooded through me, an odd mix of joy, along with dread and trepidation. The month before, these gnarled old oak trees had sheltered us as I'd walked the streets with my unwed sisters, all in various stages of pregnancy, all with different stories, yet the same old story to tell. We had lived together, worked together, laughed and cried together, and had one by one given up our babies in this red brick building. Okay, wait here. Billy nodded, scanning the building and lighting a cigarette, obviously relieved that he didn't have to go inside. Remembering how some of the babies seemed to wait longer before they were adopted had troubled me for weeks. Those babies grew fast, their eyes lighting up when we reached for them. They recognized us, and I worried about whether they remembered us and missed us, their caretakers, when they were handed over to new parents. I knew the average age for adoption had been 6 to 10 weeks. Jamie was only 3 weeks. I longed to see him, but also hoped that he had been adopted and wasn't there. The cool, dark lobby was empty and silent. Goosebumps covered my arms after I pushed open the front door. Wasting no time, I hurried straight through into the narrow hallway leading to the nursery. Hesitating at the viewing window, my heart in my throat, I forced myself to look up. I looked in. The nursery was dim and seemed empty. Only a few bassinets were visible as I peered through the glass. My eyes adjusted to the dark, and I held my breath. He's not here. Was he already adopted? Deli rounded the corner. When she saw me, her dark eyebrows shot right up to her hairline, and her face split into a shimmering smile of surprise. I grinned and waved enthusiastically. Hurrying over to unlock the door, she peered down the hall, grabbed my arm, and drew me into the nursery. Those huge liquid eyes, so close to mine, I could have counted each dense eyelash. Laura, look at you. I never got to say goodbye, Deli. My daddy and mama came and got me Hush, hush, honey. I understand. It's so good to see you, Laura. She looked behind me, worry creasing her face. Is he here? I gulped. I have to see Jamie, please. He's here. He's such a good baby. You wash up. I'll get him for you. She scurried away. I knew the drill. My hands trembled as I scrubbed them all the way up to my elbows. I grabbed a sterilized smock and smiled as I wrapped it over my clothes. Deli shut the blinds over the observation window, glancing out first to be sure no one stood there. She headed to the rear of the nursery, and I followed. My shoulders relaxed. I remembered so well the familiar peaceful grunts and baby noises, along with the white sound serenity that filled this room. Inhaling the familiar scent of sterilized cotton sheets and blankets, along with the milky smell of formula, I sighed. Then I stopped in my tracks. There stood Deli with Jamie, wrapped snugly like a cocoon. My heart ramped up to a frantic pounding, and the familiar solid lump blocked my throat. Leading me to the rockers, she gently placed my son in my arms. Hot tears wet my cheeks as the weight of that precious bundle warmed my body and healed my aching chest. I audibly exhaled. What was this? He had already changed. He was heavier. His oval face had filled out, and the fuzzy down on his baby head was thinner. I studied his closed eyes, feather soft eyelashes set flat against his baby cheeks, breathing in the soft, clean scent of him. His tiny fingers wrapped around my own and held tight. His body fit my arms perfectly as I rocked him. Surges of fierce love flooded through me, and I wanted to feel this way always. Deli, is he okay? I swallowed, and then I tickled his warm toes. He always seems to be asleep. He's full, honey. Already took 5 ounces, such a good eater, and a good sleeper, too. Your boy's one of them no-trouble babies, sugar. Don't you worry, he's a fine, healthy boy. He lets you know when he's hungry, all right. Ooh-ee, Deli chuckled. I had no idea how long I held him. After a while, I was aware of the tension signaling Deli's anxiety. Could she lose her job? Am I being selfish? Honey, you have to put him back. You need to leave here real soon. At first, I ignored her. She'd always been gentle and kind, but glancing up at her, I felt her fear. She was risking it all to give me this gift of holding my precious boy. I know, I whimpered, hugging Jamie close to me, kissing his belly head. I wish I could take him with me right now. Oh, Deli's eyes widened. No, don't say that, and don't be thinking that. This is for the best. You know that, Laura. Reluctantly, I got up, but I quickly sank back down in the rocker. Deli, I cannot leave him. A wretched, raw sob burst from my core. Jamie's eyes flooded open for a second, and then they closed again. She rose, trying to take him from me. I held on tight. Not yet, please. I could walk out the door with him. What would happen if I did? Where could I go? Would they send police? I'm his real mama, no matter what. My eyes pleaded with Deli, and her sad eyes pleaded back. I know, honey, I know, but you must leave. Now, Laura, maybe this wasn't a good idea. I clung to Jamie, studying his face, and then I walked him back, robot-like, to his bassinet. My lips lingered on his sweet head, and I squeezed him one last time. He squirmed as I laid him down. This is your son, my conscience screamed at me. Deli peered nervously between the window blinds and motioned for me to hurry. I love you, Jamie. I'm so sorry. Please don't forget your mama loves you, I whispered, paralyzed at his bassinet and willing myself once again to memorize my infant son's soft features. My eyes flickered up to the tiny birth card on the bassinet. I peeled it off and I stuffed it in my pocket. Laying my hand across his tiny body, I closed my eyes, praying that God would watch over my baby and silently begging Jamie to forgive me. And then I turned and walked away without looking back. My body rolled into itself and I stopped at the door, reached for Deli's smooth, well-worn hand, and taking it in mine, I had never held her hand, and now I held it for dear life. You've been so good to me, Deli. I'll never forget you. Deli smiled shyly and said, you're a good girl, Laura. Your little Jamie's going to be fine. Almighty Jesus is watching over both of you. Don't you forget. You go on now. Pray for your boy, but try to go on with your own life. My vision blurring, squared my shoulders, and I walked quickly down the hall, through the lobby, out the front door. In my heart, I knew I would never come back. I was leaving my firstborn son for the second time, and I would regret this for the rest of my life. I got through it. I don't always get through that chapter very easily. I just wanted to say that this is a birth card. This is the original birth card, my Jamie. And for those of you who have read the book, you know that I named him Jamie for a silly teenage reason. I was reading a book about King James of Scotland, and they called him Jamie. So I said to my girlfriend, who was telling me she's going to name her baby Timothy and call him Timmy, I said, I know my baby's a boy, and I'm going to name him James and call him Jamie. And that's why he was called Jamie. But when he found me, he signed his first email, Richard. And the first words that came out of my mouth were, they named him Richard. It was just, in my life, he'd always been Jamie. And then all of a sudden, Richard was in my life. And we joked about that the more we got to know each other, because he says, why'd you name me Jamie? And we just had such a great reunion talking about what had happened. And he learned about his life. And I mean, I learned about his life. He learned about my life. And it was just a wonderful thing. And this is not a spoiler, but I do want to say that for those of you who don't know, I might as well tell you, my son committed suicide. The same month I had signed on to publish the book for the publisher, and I almost didn't publish the book. I was so broken and my heart was sick. I had had him in my life for 4.5 years. He got to know his half brothers. I got to know his children. We flew back and forth. I visited him a lot, and he visited us a lot with the kids. And I never saw it coming. It happened right after 2020, and I think that year really his depression grew and grew during that year, and I didn't have a handle on it. I didn't, because text and talking on the phone and even FaceTiming is not the same as being there. And I couldn't travel back there, and he couldn't travel here. And he'd gone through a lot of different life changes, and it was very hard for him to handle life changes. And so when this happened, I said, thank you. When this happened, I said, I am not going to publish this book. I told my husband, and he said, okay, honey. I put so many years into it, and I almost didn't, but about 6 months went by, and the publisher was great. She said, if you don't want to publish it, the contract will tear it up. It's up to you. So kind, they were so kind to me. Everyone was. And that's another thing. Although I never talked about what had happened to me, having to give up my son, when I finally spoke about it, it was like a boulder had been lifted from my back when I could say to everyone, my son has found me. And I was proud of it. I was proud of it, not of what I'd done, but that we had come this whole lifetime and finally got to meet. So 4.5 years go by of wonderful, it was just a love fest. And when I say that, I know it sounds like a Disneyland movie, but it was. And so him taking his life was such a shock to our entire family and to his family. And it almost killed me. 6 months after this all happened, I was talking to an author who I really admire. And she said, she didn't know what had happened. She's on the East Coast. And I had not talked to her since I talked to her when I was writing the book. So she said, how's everything going now with your son and you? And I had to tell her the truth. And of course, I broke down. I'm telling her the truth. And she goes, have you written about it? And I said, no, I didn't write anything during those 6 months. I couldn't write. I couldn't even journal. It was so horrific to me that I couldn't even put it down on a page. And she said, I think your story is important and I think you should think about it. He loved your book. He loved your book and he loved you. And in fact, the last thing he said to me, 24 hours, well, actually it was 48 hours before he took his life, we had a phone call and he told me, Mom, it was music to my ears when he started calling me Mom, because that's what my other kids call me, of course. And he said, Mom, I just want you to know something. You have been the best thing that's ever happened to me. And when he said that, I said, oh, honey, with no clue that anything was going to happen. I said, oh, honey, your kids are the best thing that's ever happened to you. Look how they're wonderful. They're beautiful children. And they're just so, I don't know, they're just like such a gift. And that's how I look at all of you. You're such a gift to me. And he said, well, you just please remember this. And my husband, it was on speakerphone. My husband heard it. And we both said afterward, oh, he sounds like he's feeling so much better. He's not as depressed. And I said, I think he told me he is seeing a therapist. And because he kept telling me he was going to. And so my husband and I were so relieved that he sounded better. And then that happened less than 48 hours later. So what I think I'm trying to get at as I'm rambling here is that I realized after 6 months or so, he loved the book. He loved that I'd written his story and my story. And also I could tie the book up with an epilogue. And at least it wouldn't be, because memoir is supposed to be true. And my memoir had ended on such a happy note that I felt like it was almost a lie to put it out there. So I ended up putting that small epilogue, which some people have criticized me, saying it's not even, it's the rest of the book is more emotional or more my voice. But they don't realize I wrote that in 6 months afterward. And that was the first thing I wrote after he did that. But I come to a different place now. It's been 2 years. Now I give thanks that he found me. And I give thanks that we got to know each other, that he was a beautiful human being, and that we were so much alike. That was such a gift. And that he did not hate me like I thought he would. He didn't have to forgive me because he was as thrilled as I was that we finally found each other. So I think that this book that never happened for a few reasons. One, to tell the story of what happened in closed adoptions and the trauma of it all. And the other, to talk about the trauma that the adoptee goes through, not just the birth mother. And to be able to talk about his death has been, as hard as it has been to talk about that, it has helped me and helped others. So I do believe in my own way, this has helped me and helped others as well. And that's, about all I have there. If you want to open it up to questions and I'll answer them.
That said, we will stop recording and I'm Hannah, by